Welcome to the Contagious Code podcast, where we dive deep into code, learn practical skills, celebrate the beauty of engineering, and eliminate imposter syndrome. I am Tejas Kumar, and I've been building on the web for over 20 years at places like Vercel, Spotify, Zeta, and more. Today, we're joined by my good friend Sanket Sahu as our continuation of Founder and CEO series. Sanket is the founder and CEO of GeekyAnts, a very large consultancy that started with just a handful of people and is now scaled to over 500. It's a consultancy for React Native and web projects across India. It is one of the fastest growing consultancies across India. And Sanket is a young guy with a big team and I believe two physical buildings full of offices for his team. In this episode, we talk about what that is like. Starting with just a small amount of people, hiring the right people and scaling up to 500 plus people. We also talk about their involvement in the React and React Native communities. Sanket leads GeekyAnts, that is, leads the biggest React Native user group in the world, or meetup group in the entire world. And we talk about the size and how a meetup group can scale to be that large. We also talk about the key role of open source in growing a company like GeekyAnts to be the size that it is. And we talk about shifting from more of a services-based business approach to a product-based business approach and the trade-offs there. I also would be remiss if I didn't mention that GeekyAnts now also has a London office, so they're growing rapidly. This is a great episode. If you're interested in the business side of tech, scaling a business from a handful of people to over 500, the role of open source in growing a business, React Native, the web, and more, this episode is for you. I'd like to offer this, of course, to all of us at zero cost. This is also separate from my day job. And the way I can do that was with sponsors. So with keeping with that theme, let's thank the sponsors of today's episode and the podcast also. This podcast is sponsored by Code Crafters. My most popular talk ever is a talk called Deconstructing React, where we write a React component, but we don't import React. Instead, when we see errors like cannot read property create element of undefined, we just create an object with a property called undefined, and we slowly build React without importing it to understand how it works. Code Crafters teaches you how things like Redis and Git and all of these fundamental tools we use every day work by having us implement them from scratch in a language that we know. It teaches the underlying mechanism, which is indeed the way I also teach. So I'm really happy that Code Crafters has partnered with the Contagious Code podcast. And if you use the link in the description, that's tej.as/codecrafters, you can get 40% off if and when you start paying. Otherwise, you just use their free tier for as long as you want. So that's tej.as/codecrafters. The podcast is also sponsored by Stately.ai. Stately is a way to visualize the flow of state through your application, design an awesome state machine with a visual canvas-based builder, and then export that to code, where you just fill in the business logic that is specific to your domain. It's a great way to understand and make your application bulletproof while also very rapidly iterating. If you'd like to give that a try, go to stately.ai. Finally, we're partnered with That Conference. If you'd like to win a free ticket to attend any of That Conference events coming up shortly, share this episode on social media and just at me, and we'll get you into a raffle to win that. So that's thatconference.com. Thank you for listening to the ad reads. And now for my discussion with Sanket Sahu. Sanket Sahu, my good friend, I'm so happy to have you on the podcast.
Hey Tejas, I'm super excited to be here too.
You know, this has been a long time coming because we became friends 2 years ago at React India and Goa. I met you and I was just so impressed with you, with GeekyAnts, with all the work you've been doing. And now I have this podcast. I've got, founder CEO season going on. You're that. It's just a natural fit. So welcome. I'm really happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, Tejas. And was it React India? I think we met right before React India at React Nexus. That was our first interaction in person.
React Nexus, right, in Bangalore.
Yes.
My home where I was born. But this is not about me. Before we get into a really, really great discussion, for those who haven't heard of you, who aren't as familiar with you as me, could you do a little bit of an introduction to yourself, GeekyAnts, the consulting, all of it?
Yeah. Hey everyone. So I'm Sanket Sahu. I run a company called GeekyAnts. We are into IT consulting, mainly focused towards web and mobile app development. And we have been involved with the React and React Native community for quite a while. We have been doing React for almost 9 years, and React Native since the day it was introduced for Android. So, and we have seen all the ups and downs of React Native, and we have tried to like contribute with our open source contributions like NativeBase, now GlueStack UI, and yeah, we're doing conferences, and we also host the world's largest React Native meetup group. So I think that's a bit about me and GeekyAnts.
Wow. That's a lot of things. Okay, one of the things we do on this podcast intentionally in our discussions is we draw lines. We start at point A and we go to point B.
Okay.
I want to start at point A, GeekyAnts. I asked about the origin story of this name, and you said, I don't know, we just wanted to come up with something. So, okay, you started GeekyAnts. Can we walk through starting it to now being this thing with over 400 people? I mean,
Yeah.
that's some type of step, right? And I ask because there's some really reputable software companies in the space, companies like G2I or Infinite Red. They do consulting. I think Infinite Red does consulting, G2I does staff augmentation. In any case, most of these aren't like at the scale of GeekyAnts, and I'm assuming this is just a scale relative to the population of India. So could we maybe talk about that, like draw the line from point A to now 400 plus people?
Yeah, I think there's a strong history and how it happened, because like me and my brother, we were growing up when my dad got his first computer way back in late 1980s, and
Which one was it?
it was I think it didn't have a monitor. It was just a keyboard with CPU inside that, and you had to connect it to a TV to see the output. And the only thing that it ran was GW Basic or some version of basic programming language. So it was in late 1980s. I was not even born, but I saw the whole evolution of computers from that point to the time when we got say 286, 386, and Pentium 1, 2, 3, and internet happened during that time. And yeah, I was all over like learning these things, getting exposed to all these things. And my dad was a single father, so I spent most of the time with him. And that's when I picked up a lot of coding. In the QBasic was the first language, and I started as a freelancer when internet happened right after that.
How old were you at the time?
I was 13, I guess. Yeah.
13 as a freelancer.
Yes. And it was in a small town of India, which was, they didn't even know what internet was, or people were just getting used to what computers are. And I was lucky that I was around people who were early adopters to internet and things like that. And I started freelancing, and then went all the way, like completed my education, and then started GeekyAnts with Pratik and few other folks. And then there was a massive shift from like being an individual developer or a freelancer to building a company. And that shift was, I mean, it's two different things. It's not, I mean, you definitely learn your core skills as a freelancer or as an individual. But when you're building companies or scaling up, it's a whole different ballgame. And we went through that. I mean, definitely one major part of scaling to 400 is what you just said, is relative to the number of people or engineers that you get in India compared to like great companies that I look up to, like G2I, Infinite Red, or even Callstack and Software Mansion. More or less, these companies started around the same time. And we were lucky enough that we got like resources in terms of like engineers, and also a bunch of different things that you have an added advantage when you are like working from India, right? And yeah, the whole shift went from like me being a meek developer working in a dark room to like going on a stage and talking to a bunch of people and making sure that people learn from what you do. So yeah, that's a massive shift, I would say.
Wow. Okay, so the line is becoming clear, especially from the beginning. I think many listeners have the same experience up to a point that you had. Meaning, you go from a tech sort of backward. No, I don't mean that disparagingly, but you go from a community that doesn't know a lot about tech to, okay, you're the sole tech person here, and you start doing some work, you start making some money, you help people. I had this experience, right, when I was young. Wrote a lot of code in a place where it wasn't, we were, the best way people could deploy to production was drag and drop over FileZilla. There was no concept of AWS, right? Back in those days. And so I was like, look, we have S3, we have these things, and people went, "Oh, cool. Can you do that? We'll pay you." So I get it up to that point, but at some point you clone yourself. The shift you mentioned to go from engineer to founder. Let's make that a little bit more concrete, because how did that happen? Were you just doing it with friends, and at some point you decided, hey, if we charge these folks like three times, then we can divide it by three, and we like how do you go from the solo to the multiple?
Yeah, I think there are multiple parts to it. One is definitely the straightforward calculation that you see that, okay, probably if you're doing it alone and you're getting paid by, say, number of hours, and if you can distribute it, scale it up, then it has a direct maths to it, right? You can scale the number of hours and then bill more and earn more, that mindset. But at the same time, uh, I was very clear along with my co-founders that uh, we just don't uh, be a team augmentation sort of providers. We make sure that we build something that can be reused over
Mm,
and over again. And we had a very clear mindset of problem solving rather just charging people. And once you have that just problem solving attitude, everything else becomes like a resource to you to solve problems, be it uh, reusable libraries where we contributed with open source, or maybe be it like a common starter kit, for example, that can be used across multiple clients. And you charge by IP and rather being hourly rates. So that was one part of it. And second, definitely here in India, when we started in around 2011, 12, somewhere around that time, uh, we saw there was a huge gap between what was going around the world and what was happening in India. If you see today, I mean, Indian developer community, they pick up things really fast and then they
yeah,
just make it the buzzword and try to, I mean, we get a lot of good things, but also at the same time, we get a lot of noise, uh,
yeah,
which was totally missing back in 2011, 2012. Uh, and we came at the right time and making sure we hired the right uh, people and also engineers who were fresh into their careers, and we started growing people in house. And it was easier to grow people in house with a fresh mindset, being right after the college, like college grads, rather hiring somebody who was already established in the industry. And this
yeah,
has been one of the key thing at GeekyAnts, that we had a lot of fresh college grads and worked with them to build their like profile, build their how they look at things beyond coding, and it has helped. I mean, even today, like all the top engineers who we have here at GeekyAnts, most of them uh, were fresh college graduates when they joined, and now they're like 8 9 years into GeekyAnt's journey, and they are like building more teams under them and making sure that what we started, it trickles down across the
yeah.
organization downwards. And also from the very fresh college graduates who joined today, they also contribute in their own ways and push things upwards as well. So it's a bi-directional culture that we have tried to build. Yeah.
That is so cool. This reminds me of, like, if I consider other companies in the industry that are doing similar things, I think Vercel comes to mind. Of
Mhm,
course, now it's bigger, but
mhm.
back when I was around, maybe not college grads, but everybody was super super young, very very early. I think of my old set of coworkers, people like Javi,
Mhm.
or even Tim Newtkins, like the maintainer of Next.js was
Yeah.
a child,
Yeah.
who just loved open source, right? And now they're
The,
exactly as you mentioned. So I think that's a really great model. And indeed, I think open source has a role there.
yeah.
And
Mhm,
also in Africa, in Nigeria, Hack Sultan is doing exactly this with
mhm.
his company called Talent QL, where he'll educate them and then match them with jobs. So it's not quite a company, but it's really helping folks. And I love that your company is built on this.
Yeah.
Um, there's a with consulting as a business.
Yeah.
So I did have a very small consulting business at some point,
Mhm,
and um, the challenge for me was always like recurring revenue, because if it's project based, you build a project, you ship it. Um, and then you get new projects. And for me, like there was often, and this is not just me, I've heard this across many people, there's often a queue of projects, and sometimes you go like, whoa, I need to, this is all the projects we can do in a year, call us next year. Whereas like startups that are product based typically measure, MRR or ARR, like monthly recurring revenue or annual recurring revenue. How
Yeah.
does that work for you at GeekyAnts? Is it mostly based around recurring revenue, or do you actually have like a big queue of projects,
Uh,
or is
so
it some
we do have
mix?
we do have like queue of projects and a proper sales funnel from where we get the leads and then we talk to them, convert them, and then work on different project ideas. Definitely, uh, we have a small part of GeekyAnts as well where we are building products, and these are mostly uh, a part of it is dev tools around like selling starter kits and say premium component libraries. That's one part of it. Then we are building a few products as well, but I'll get into that a bit later. Talking about consulting, uh, definitely uh, we have built a lot of strong hold on the marketing front, and not marketing I would call it, but more how this happened by itself. Like we built a brand
That's
when,
so
when
cool.
yeah, when we just kept working and doing things what we believed in, and then later we realized, okay, this is the secret sauce, and that secret sauce was talk more about what you're doing, uh, and get involved with other folks. And as you mentioned, I think right before this, like you need to show more of yourself. You need
Yeah,
to put yourself out there, and then uh, let the magic happen. So it somewhat happened like that, wherein the open source projects and the number of articles and the meetups and the conferences that we went to, uh, it had an impact, and slowly that built the whole branding. And over the years, that also like became a credible source.
yeah,
And now we have people reaching out from different channels altogether. So it's mostly project based. People do talk to us, and then sometimes we do say, no, we are full of hands, we can't take it. But
yeah.
there are also days when it's like we have like say 10% or 15% of people just on bench. And
Wow.
yeah, but we make sure that we use that time for being creative and work on maybe open source or R&D and do some crazy things.
That's awesome. Yeah, I respect that so much. You mentioned that, actually not you, but Matthias Bildman. So we had this episode with the co-founder of Netlify, and he mentioned that as a founder, you have to be willing to adapt to changing environments because everything's constantly, especially in an early stage. Like I asked him about being a CEO, and he made this really great contrast about being a professional CEO and being an amateur CEO. And an amateur CEO being like, look, I've never done this before. I'm a developer. I like open source. Now I'm here.
Yeah.
Um, and the professional CEO, usually the board brings this person in, they like have contacts, whatever, and that person just knows how to be a CEO, like a in the traditional sense, like a
Yeah.
business person. As an open source engineer, we don't. And Matt, mentioned you have to. It's highly volatile. You have to adapt and change.
Yeah.
You seem to have done that, right? You went from being as you mentioned, an in a dark room solo developer to thinking about branding and marketing and finance and payroll and how to
Yeah.
when these people have time on the bench, like what do we do with them? How do we hire from universities? Like what was that transition like? Can we draw a line between open source developer to business person? How did that change you? How can, for people on a similar journey, how can they expect to change? And what's the best like protocol? I mean, it's not. What's the best pathway to
Mhm.
to adapt in a good direction there?
Um, I think when I started, I had like zero experience.
Yeah,
Even my co-founders, they were like very new, so nobody had any professional experience of. I mean, a couple of co-founders did have some experience on managing people, little bit, but we had no experience on running a business, and that transition took a while because it was all very raw, and we were learning while doing things and making sure that we do it well because it also impacts the bunch of people who are working with you. So their profile and their learning and how they level up during their journey. That also becomes very, you become responsible for that, right? And that also puts some pressure on you. But the journey from like looking at a code base, or say looking at a very zoomed in version of things, to zoom out and looking at business, I think that happened in a very transitional way. And slowly I started looking, when I spoke to multiple clients and people outside GeekyAnts, it became more like, okay, what is the macro problem that we are solving?
Yeah.
What is the macro secret sauce, or the whole whole pipeline, how it is working out? And we learned, like, right from, say, legals to payrolls. We got one of our co-founders is a CA, chartered accountant, and he
Okay.
deals with a lot of legalities, and also he has experience with say all things finance, legals, bookkeeping. So that worked as a stronghold. uh, and even the other, like the like six we were six people when we started, and everybody had their own expertise. Like, I
Mm.
was more inclined towards like uh, how the final product looks like, the quality part, the design and engineering part, while one of the co-founders was very much into CA, finance, HR, legals. uh, when While Pratik, who's my brother, so he is much into, like, he had the business sense early on.
Right.
He learned a lot of things while doing, since, like, he's elder to me, he also gained all those experience very early on in life. So that worked really well. We have Megha, sort of, they worked. Megha is very strong with design, and she
Mm.
leads the whole design thing at GeekyAnts. So I think the having a good combination of people when we started, that also worked as a good way to transition this out into
Yeah.
building like bigger teams as well. Yeah.
That's great. So it's not just that you were the solo founder and you had to adapt and learn all this stuff,
Yes.
as was the case with me with my consultancy, but you had people. I think this is, as you mentioned, this is the secret sauce. It's
Yes.
people who have their own unique interests. I have to assume that your chartered accountant co-founder wasn't as into the code or into the design as you were. So it actually worked really nicely. You had complementary skills. Wow, man, that's
Yes. Yeah.
that's 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 a good amount of luck, even that all of you would align this way.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, luck definitely played an important role of finding the right people at the right time, and everybody looking forward to like build something like GeekyAnts. Yeah.
Incredible. So okay, so your advice, and I'm asking you for your advice,
Yeah.
so it's not unsolicited. Your advice would be, zoom out, get a
Mhm.
broad view,
Mhm.
and if you have the people already that can handle all those different aspects that come when you get a panoramic view,
Yeah.
you're good. If not, probably find those people and get their support one way or another.
Totally.
That's what worked for you. Awesome.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
so great.
Yeah.
Okay, so since you now have zoomed out and you have this big broad view, if can you, I don't know if you can, but if I was to press you a little bit, can we condense or gather one exceedingly important thing from the broad view? You, like, obviously, like, a lot of these things are complementary and equal, right? For example, you can't run a business without HR and finance, but you also can't run a business without people and upskilling and planning. Meaning, when we don't have projects, what do we do with these folks? So is there something that sort of speaks to you as this thing is one of the most important things here, and if we don't have this, we don't have a company, from your big broad panoramic view?
I think the problem solving attitude at every level is the key that drives everyone at GeekyAnts. Be it talking to customers, be it open source, be it picking up the next offering that we want to add, or like every single person, they have to have that mindset of problem solving, and then everything becomes a trickle down effect of that. Be it like anything, everything, branding, marketing, sales, engineering, design. If you have problem solving at the root of your organization,
Yeah.
it just trickles down.
Fantastic. I will take that, write it down, frame it. I think there's a lot of value to seeing things as problems that can be solved, right?
Yeah.
When I was a child, a lot of the adults around me would say, I don't talk about problems. I only talk about solutions. But you can't have solutions unless there are problems. Like solutions are like a foreign key that depend on the problem table, and so problems are great, especially if you then combine that. And I think this is what you're talking about. If you combine that with growth mindset or a stress is good, problems are good mindset, because otherwise we're going to be bored. I received that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Finally, about scaling, and I do want to talk about some product work, some open source work, but about scaling this business and drawing this line at some point. And I know this because I've worked at 6 people companies. I've worked at 30 people companies. I've worked at 500. I currently work at a 500 person company, and I've worked at a 4,500 people company. So that's the spectrum. And of course, this is not on the scale of India, like Infosys, which has, I don't know, hundreds of thousands, right?
Yeah.
But what I've noticed is that there's a fallacy in the industry where you think, okay, if I hire like 10 engineers, I'm going to have 10x the output. When in fact it's not a multiplier, it's a divider. So if you hire 10 engineers, you might have a tenth of the output because people have discussions and so on. So all that, this is my long-winded way of saying, when I was at Spotify, we had to be more careful because we had like live listeners, like millions of people listening at any given point of time. So you can't move fast, you can't break things as liberally. I
Yeah.
have to assume that as you go from solo developer to 400 people, things slow down. There may be a cultural shift where you incur this like process tax. You have to
Yeah.
have some processes that are reproducible, but you pay for it. Could you maybe speak to that? Are you all still able to move rapidly? What's the best way to pay that tax and still be like highly productive?
Yeah. I think when you scale, cultural shift is inevitable. That happens like when you are 6, when you are say 35, 40, and when you grow to 150, and then beyond that. This also comes from the book like Sapiens, where they talk about how the early communities of apes were formed, and how they could function in a small group of 25 like chimps or something like that. And they had some sort of structure, like the alpha male, and they had some sort of rules, which was not documented, but it worked for a small group of
Yeah.
20-25 animals, right? Uh, then in the same book, the author also talks about like up to about 150 people you can have a direct connection wherein you talk about the problem, you solve it, and it can be more direct, like, okay, this is the thing, we want to do this is the project, this is the problem, let's solve it. But beyond 150, I think what you need is stories, and a common story that everybody needs to believe in. And that's when we started thinking about, okay, how do we like make sure that the culture does not go out of sync. Definitely we'll have like a bit of differences between the teams, or maybe the departments, like the sales folks might not have the same culture as the engineering folks at the company, but there has to be some sort of baseline culture. So we started like writing it, emphasizing it very often, like, okay, we started initially with move fast and break things, but that worked for Meta, did work for us for a while, but did not work in the longer run because we started like having bad quality products altogether.
Mm.
uh, so we changed it a bit. So we moved towards a bigger vision and mission, what we want to do. So we have we stated today as empower everyone to build things faster, and that encapsulates most of the things that we do. But definitely at a scale of like 450 folks, you cannot run everything with culture. There would be people who might not learn it, who have a very different way of looking at things, and that's where you need some sort of processes, as you said, like the tax of processes, process tax, right? You need that for sure, be it from a very HR perspective to making sure that people have uh, a tool or something to like document all those things, like number of leaves and all those things, right? uh, and also
Yeah.
very strong processes when it comes to project executions as well. Like, okay, these are the baseline tools that we use, but at the same time they have some flexibility of using something else too. So it comes at a cost, and definitely the speed at which a team of 15 people can function, 450 cannot. and it does slow down for a bit. But you also have to look at it and go back to people and say, no, we can't just wait for 3 days for Wi-Fi password, for example, right? So you have to get into the details and break it when it goes when the water goes beyond your head, right? So you have to. So it's a combination of both the things. I love what Steve Jobs used to say, that Apple is the largest startup in the world, and we go by the same thing. Like, we don't want to be called a corporate or an enterprise at any point, because that just, I mean, that comes with a de facto mindset of, okay, too organized. Don't want to get there, because that slows down the whole development and
Yeah.
advancement. Yeah.
This is so great. I heard so many good takeaways there that I want to highlight for the listeners. Number one, like off the bat, you mentioned it's really good to collect yourselves around stories when you reach a certain size.
Yeah.
I've seen this. This reminds me of a really powerful piece of science that I saw once. There was this paper where they had people, random people, across various geographies. People in Asia, the USA, Europe, whatever. Like, I'm probably getting that wrong, but they were highly distributed. Put it that way. And all these people were hooked up to heart rate monitors and asked to watch the same story, the same movie. And at some point, they got the heart rate readings from these folks. They never met each other. They had no connection to each other. And they printed it out on like transparent paper and sort of overlaid them. And it was exactly 100% in sync because of the story. Incredible. So stories like synchronize our physiology, our brain, our body. Incredible. So I like that you highlight that. I've been part of larger organizations. In fact, the one I'm a part of now even will do like they place a lot of value on values. What are your values? These are our company values. Like Amazon has the leadership principles, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, so you what you're saying here is you're validating. Yeah, you need that. You need people to have like a piece of a story point that they can point to and go, this is who we are. And then you mention some people are not going to care about that stuff. It's going to be frou-frou fluff from HR. And for those folks, you need process. So I love that you mentioned it's not process first, it's values and story first, and then process is the fallback. Do I have that correct?
Totally. We have this written slide for people who are on board with GeekyAnts. Culture is greater than process. That's there on the third slide itself.
That's awesome. I'm going to take that. I'm going to run with it. And then you mentioned this of course this phenomenal Steve Jobs quote where it has to feel like a startup. So I love that. Let's talk a little bit about open source. GeekyAnts has contributed an enormous amount of stuff to open source, be it from NativeBase, GlueStack. Can we talk about? Let's draw a line there. Let's draw a line from starting with open source. You mentioned you were one of the first folks in the whole world to adopt React Native at some reasonable scale.
Yep.
Let's maybe start there. The line from there. You're running the company. You like open source. You were doing open source before GeekyAnts. Where in the GeekyAnts story do you start with open source? Maybe from getting interested in something to then the contribution to then the frameworks.
Yeah, I think 2015 September. That's when the Android for React Native happened. We were at the size of I think 35 people, somewhere around that. And then React Native happened. We were just doing web stuff. We knew we were good with JavaScript. Then React Native came in and it was solving one of the major issues, major problems. We were good with JavaScript, and can we use that to build mobile apps? Within a month, we started building native mobile apps. So that was the impact of React Native on GeekyAnts. It made us from a web shop to mobile plus
universal
sort of thing. And we used this opportunity to even use the technology and experience it, that it was so raw when it was announced, the earlier version of React Native. We started building component libraries, reusable across internal to GeekyAnts. Like we used, say, some set of components across 3 projects early on towards 2016, early in 2016. And then we realized, why are we not putting it out there? We had no experience of open source until then. 2016, January, February, we were clueless. And it worked like magic. The day when we put it out in the open, that was the tipping point. That was the point where the whole journey of GeekyAnts changed.
Wow. So
We were
open source, like open source.
it changed everything for GeekyAnts. That
Wow.
was the point where we went from a very small, just another dev company in India, to a company that can contribute back to the source from where React Native started. We got in
Yeah.
touch with the people from Meta and different parts of the world that okay, we love this, we want to try it out, and then we saw massive spike in npm downloads and the number of GitHub stars, and that worked as a magic marketing strategy, which we realized much later. We didn't know that something like GitHub stars, something like when people talk about us on say Reddit or in some GitHub issue, would have an impact, and that impact was massive. We started getting requests from random places in the world. Like we got our first contact from Amsterdam, then few people contacted
Wow.
from some parts of the US, and we were just here in Bangalore, right? We had no clue. We started getting requests from companies like the MNCs like Wipro, Infosys in India, to train them on React Native because they also saw value.
Wow.
Yeah, so it had a different kind of effect and impact in all the directions, from business,
Wow.
from engineers, from marketing, everything. And yeah, so that's the sort of change that we had with putting our work out there, be it open source contribution or getting involved with communities. And I was also called to Chain React, my first ever panel in an international conference 7 years back. Uh,
Wow.
and the story continues from there to till today.
Incredible. What I'm hearing is, and this is something high priority, everybody listening to needs to, if you want at least to see some semblance of maybe success, is put your work out there, build in public, right? Swix almost started this like learn in public movement. Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in that. Personally, for me, I grew up with people telling me, don't don't care what other people think of you. Be strong. But actually, I found a lot of positives. A lot of value comes from caring what other people think of me. Because, like as you mentioned, *Sapiens* from Yuval Harari, this book, it tells you the story that humanity evolves and gets better always together in community. Like we have to belong to each other, and to belong to each other, we have to actually care what people think of us. And so I've had open source moments where I've put things out there and it's been really poor quality and people went like, yuck, don't use this, it's bad. Similar to how some people talk about React Native. And I want to hear from you about that. But that has actually helped me. Like you mentioned, problem solving. Then you see it as a problem. Oh, nobody likes my code. What's wrong? And you improve. One way or another, when you bring things out into the public, you and the thing gets better. And it may hurt before that, as it did for me, but I love that you called it out. Because you adopted React Native early. It shifted the course of your business mainly because of open source. You got invited to Infinite Red's conference, Chain React, all of this. And today you run, what is it, the largest React Native meetup group in the world? Is
Yes, yeah,
that right?
yep,
How,
that's
how
right.
many people is that?
I think it's a bit around 8,500, somewhere around
My
that. Yeah,
goodness. Wow.
yeah.
But this is not one single meetup. This is a group of meetups.
So this is just React Native Bangalore meetup group I'm talking about. We
Okay.
have other meetup groups as well, but this is the most famous one. Yeah.
Incredible. And now all this work with React Native, building the universal apps and so on, you're organizing a conference as well. That's React Native. And can we talk a little bit about that? And then I want to let's celebrate your success on open source and React Native a little bit here. But then I want to also talk about the ups and downs because Airbnb dropped it. What's that about? But to
Yeah.
start with, let's talk about the conference. Can you tell us about the GeekConf?
So we have been doing meetups here locally in Bangalore. I have been a part of different conferences as a speaker or a panelist in React Native conferences around the world. Uh, and we came up with the idea of doing a conference in the places where we don't get enough conferences around React Native and also modern web or maybe the universal aspect of it. And definitely we are based out of Bangalore, so that was the first preference. But at the same time, we had eyes on Berlin as well, for multiple reasons. Definitely, we don't see a React Native conference in Berlin, and second, what an amazing city it is.
The
And
best city in the world.
and the most important part, we have got I've got my friends there in Berlin. I've got
Yeah.
you and a bunch of other folks as well. So Berlin worked really well as a location, which was like the center for all the time zones as well. For India, for works somewhat for the US as well. And we could easily call people, the great folks and the contributors in the whole ecosystem. It would be easier for them to travel in person and then do it. And so that's why we decided of doing a conference in Berlin. It's happening on 25th of July. The name is the Geek Conf, and the theme is obviously React Native, React Universal, Modern Web, around that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. I look forward to attending it and speaking at it myself. And for listeners of the podcast, we'll probably do a ticket giveaway. Whoever's listening, if you want to get a free ticket, share this episode on social media. Great. That's a long way, man, to go from participating as soon as React Native for Android came out to now organizing a conference about it. It seems like it's been great for your business. You've built a lot of success from it because it unlocked this whole area of native apps to you. Why did Airbnb drop it and say it was a bad idea?
I think that article is one of the most misinterpreted article, and the misinterpretation comes from the title of the blog, the article, "Sunsetting React Native at Airbnb." If you read that article, it's so different. I mean, definitely sunsetting React Native at Airbnb, there's something hidden that they should have added, and I'm being very upfront about this because of, I mean, multiple issues, which includes organizational challenges, team structure, and and most of it was related very specific to Airbnb and not React Native as a technology that they should have probably updated the title as. And it has caused a lot of harm, and it had a very bad impact on React Native as a whole. And even today, I think it's a about 6 year, 5 year old, or even more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a 6 year old article. And even today, when we speak to our clients and we recommend them, okay, use React Native, they send us this link to that article that Airbnb wrote. I think done and dusted. It's been like 6 years. Come on, a lot has happened since then. What Expo used to be, what React Native used to be back then, and we have like brilliant things right now in React Native. If you look at the latest version 0.74, it has bridgeless mode, the new architecture. Expo is like more mature than ever with their Expo router, and a lot of things in and around the whole ecosystem has evolved, at least 10x from what it used to be. But that article has not been updated, although people have talked more around it, but there hasn't been a stronger credible source as much as Airbnb to cause that level of impact in a very positive direction. So that feels bad, to be honest. And we are trying everything to make sure that we fix that image of React Native, and we have fixed it
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you fixed it well. As far as I know, React Native is the only way, right, to build native apps, so iOS, Android, even desktop now, with JavaScript or TypeScript. There isn't, like, I hear of things like Ionic and Capacitor and even Tauri 2.0 now supports mobile, but this isn't native. This is WebView and you're running web page inside with some device bindings. But truly native, there's no other alternative, right? Do I have that right?
I think NativeScript also does native views. I'm not really sure, but and also there was another open source project called Open Native by the folks behind NativeScript as well, and that does something similar. But yeah, React Native is truly one of the only ways, if we don't consider all these smaller projects that are just very in its early stage. But yeah, mature ones, yes, React Native is the only one.
Awesome. Yeah. React Native has this, or React has this thesis. I think it's React Native. Write once, run anywhere. And Expo took that and made it sort of amplified it, right? Once really run anywhere. I think Expo has Expo Universal or something, where you don't just get a native app, but it runs on the web and it runs in on a desktop and Android and iOS, truly universal.
Yeah.
Is that still the case? And the reason I'm asking is, so I built an app with React Native a long time ago, to be fair. The experience was painful, again, because this was around the time Airbnb abandoned it or sunset it. And for me, the pain was I couldn't have the same components in web and in native, and I wanted that. And so there's been work there. There's been Vincent Reamer created React Native DOM,
Yeah.
and then Ian, I think Ian Gallagher from X Twitter created React Native Web. So there's been this effort to try and like literally write the same components and use them everywhere. However, with native, it's a bit more complex because you have this like view component, for example, that you have div. So the reason they don't work is because the web platform components are not abstracted. Like in the mobile, you need to abstract everything. At least that's my thesis. So anyway, my pain was I built an app with React Native, and there was this dissonance between the web platform and native because of the abstraction I mentioned. But also, I came back to my app, like it worked, it was stable. I came back to my app 3 months later, nothing worked, and Xcode wouldn't run my build. And sure, this you can say organizational team structure, my fault. I didn't run the project every day and build it with Xcode. I didn't have any cron job that would just check if it built every day, because Apple is ultimately responsible for the OS, right? Those are some problems I had with React Native. Are they still the case, or what is put it this way? If Airbnb did it wrong, what is the way that has worked for y'all at GeekyAnts to run React Native consistently and at scale?
I have so many things to say on this, but yeah, let's start somewhere. Okay, so write once and run anywhere. I think that started in early 90s by the creators of Java, right? And then React took a different turn, and then they said that it's learn once and write anywhere. So it's a different way of looking at things. React, the core framework or the core folks behind React, they never said that you should write once and run anywhere. They said learn once and write anywhere. So
Wow.
The whole ideology changed a bit. I mean, it started differently, but now the push from companies like Expo, and even we are doing our bit in that, to bring the right ones run anywhere paradigm or slogan back. Because when React Native started, the whole architecture, if you look at React Native versus the other ones, like others like say Ionic or Flutter, they use the same rendering engine, be it web or the whole OpenGL. What's that called? Forgot the name. Shopify as Skia.
Hydrogen?
Yeah, Skia.
Oh yeah, Skia.
Yeah. So Flutter uses Skia, and web is common everywhere. So they use the same rendering engine everywhere and keep the code. So the look and feel is so consistent because it's the same rendering engine. While with React Native, it's not the same. It's different for different platforms, and this problem is obvious because you're rewiring things with the same common API across multiple platforms. So that fragmentation, that was supposed to happen early on because we were just dealing with multiple platforms and frameworks. And so fast forward to 2023, 24. All these years, a lot of people like Nicholas, who's the creator of React Native Web, plus the people like Evan Bacon from Expo, they have worked really hard to bring the fragmentation down and unify them in terms of look and feel. And now we are able to say that write once and run anywhere. And the difference between the platforms is so minimized that you don't feel a lot of those issues. And I spoke to Expo, I think about a year back. I spoke to Charlie, and one of the top priorities that Charlie had on the roadmap was the upgrade issues and backward compatibility. This was a well-known thing like 4 years back, 3 years back with React Native and Expo, but now it's like they're trying to be compatible with a lot of older versions. I mean, he had a very good analogy that if you built a website in 2005, even today, if you open it, it works, right? So web is that strong when it comes to backward compatibility, and they are driven by the same idea for the whole Expo and React Native ecosystem.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, so that's so good to see. If you look at the new project by Meta, it's called React Strict DOM, RSD. So React Strict DOM flips the game of how React Native started, uh, and the whole API of React Native was brought to the web with React Native Web, but that caused the overhead of the entire React Native Web bundle on the web projects. While it should be the other way, because if you want to add a little extra bytes to be shipped with native mobile apps, that's okay, but with web, it's not compromisable.
Yeah.
So with React Strict DOM, we are bringing the APIs of web to React Native. So
Awesome.
you still ship much less on the web while the same code base runs on the native side. So that's an interesting take in this whole journey of React Native, that the core team itself, they are pushing universal approach with libraries like React Strict DOM and even Stylex, which is the styling engine used by Meta for all their multiple projects. So it's interesting to see what we are seeing right now in the whole journey of React Native, be it from a very performance point of view to all the way to the developer experience and the API side of things.
That solves almost all the pain points I mentioned earlier. And now,
Yeah.
true story, I'm somewhat interested to try using React Native again and build the app that I tried to build. The app that I tried to build, and I succeeded until it broke because of backward compatibility,
Yeah.
was a tracker for a very specific. So I have a blood disorder and I have to take medicine and it doesn't last very long. So it was a tracker to show me like how much of this stuff is in my blood right now, an
Okay.
estimate. It was really cool.
Interesting.
I did a talk at a conference about it a long time ago and people saw it and they went like, wow, that's so cool. And it was React Native. But then I came back a month later and it didn't work. So I want to try it again. Let's talk about GeekyAnts' contributions to this, write once, run anywhere. Specifically, I'm talking about GlueStack. I've been a fan of GlueStack since I first heard about it, but now it's pivoted. For the listeners, let's draw a line there, right? GeekyAnts, we already have a line from GeekyAnts to open source to React Native to the GeekConf. GlueStack, what is that? Let's draw a line to that.
So I talked about NativeBase, which was our first open source contribution in the React Native space as a UI component library, but it evolved throughout its journey. Like NativeBase 1 was just copy paste, very low level things. NativeBase 2.0 was based on material design, which was too strict for people to customize. Then 3.0 was based uh, on utility props, similar to Tailwind.
Did it
Uh,
have any interop with web or was it strictly
Yes,
native?
yes. So from V3 onwards, we made it universal, native-based
Okay.
V3. Uh, but with the platforms changing too frequently, it was very hard for us to build on top of it. Even today, if you look at, say, React server components, and if you want to make that compatible with something on the React Native side, it's very hard. But we are doing that, and we are trying to solve that problem. So the whole idea of GlueStack came in when we wanted to do a full stack framework, because we work on multiple client projects and we thought, okay, we need a framework that runs on all the platforms and has a consistent backend. We don't have to write APIs or something that is auto generated.
So
Uh,
it's like
yeah,
Next.js but native.
it's native plus web both plus backend. So that was a bigger problem to solve. We we realized it within the first few weeks or a month later that, okay, this is too much to do. We can't
Yeah.
build everything and put it out there. Probably let's uh, pick a smaller problem, and we pick the problem of universal code basis for the front end, not just front end, but including the up to the Next.js backend API layer, not going
Okay.
beyond that. So it's just talking about the edge functions and uh, up to that level. And for the backend, we have options of choosing, say, Nest.js plus GraphQL, or maybe if the bigger companies are a big fan of, say, Spring Boot, they can also choose that. But the interface has to be the same.
Mm.
Now GlueStack focuses more on writing once and running anywhere or everywhere. Uh, as I talked about the platform changing quite often, we had to deal with issues like performance issues or even the architecture like React Server components. This ships no JavaScript, but you can't do that when it comes to mobile apps.
Yeah.
So how do we solve it? So we have tried to use a common API and ship both the components. One is RSC, another is not RSC, which is just for mobiles, and it is working pretty well. We have built a new version of GlueStack UI, which is RSC compatible, and
Wow.
it also uses NativeWind, which is another project by now a part of Expo as well, which gives you the class name support of Tailwind across web and mobiles. So so NativeWind for styling, and then GlueStack UI for uh, a unified API of components across, irrespective of the platform. Uh, and combined with the support of RSC, we have cracked this whole component library sort of thing that works with like 100 lighthouse score on like web desktop, 99 on web mobile, and also gives you like flawless like scrolls and everything on native iOS and native Android, and works crazy like with performance with the DX what we have. We are pretty happy with it right now.
Is it 1.0 yet?
uh I think so. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, we are about to bump it maybe this week, or we have tagged alpha still, but we
Okay.
are pretty close to being confident that okay, that we can bump 1.0 with native Wind plus GlueStack that works on like Next and Expo everywhere.
Incredible. How does one, you mentioned multiple times that it's RSC or React Server Components compatible.
Yeah.
What does that mean in the context of native? So does it, because what I know from React Server Components is the components run on some server, either your local dev server or a CI machine or an actual server in the cloud. And what they return is a tree of JSX, right? A
Mhm.
tree of VDOM that then React on the client will pick up and hydrate or reconcile. What is that? How does that work in native? Is there a server listening on the device for? I'll let you speak to that. My
Okay, so
brain is breaking.
so we don't have uh, React Server components on native. The whole point of doing this is to enable things on Next.js side, because Expo is still working on RSC compatibility for mobile phones. Once that happens, our components will just work fine.
Oh, cool.
But today we have built a common API so that it does not ship any JavaScript if you use those components on Next.js. That's the whole point, and that is very critical if you want to achieve like good SEO scores or performance scores on the
Yeah.
web. Yeah, and we are
Okay.
rewriting GeekyAnts.com altogether using GlueStack UI and having a mobile version as well as a free gift.
This is so cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's it's a UI library or a component library that works in any frame in Next.js and Expo as framework. So you would still have. So it's not like it removes the need for Next.js or Expo. It works within those frameworks, as opposed to what GlueStack was before, which was almost a replacement for that. Do I understand correctly? Where
Yes.
it was okay. So now it's just components plus maybe native Wind.
Yeah.
What about the BFF layer? So the backend for the front end layer. Is that no longer being worked on? Is that a separate project?
Yes, that's a separate project. So we have spun off different projects into its own startups at GeekyAnts, and one of them is Bolt. Bolt is now a framework for data centers, which we are trying to
Okay.
build. So a part of it is very similar to DigitalOcean, and then we have uh, a part of it is something that lets you run like full stack projects on your local machine, similar to Dockerfile, but does not compromise on, say, the host machine capabilities and not running VMs and all those things. So bunch of different things. I won't get into the details, but yeah, it's been forked and spun off into like different projects. But eventually, we see a roadmap of things merging, wherein it'll be more convenient for like developer experience altogether.
This is so great. I want to try GlueStack UI, and see what it feels like just to customize, because this has always been my difficult thing with UI libraries is, they're just hard to customize. Can I ask you? So, okay, GlueStack UI went from being, or GlueStack went from being a framework to a library. There's a trend these days in, like, instead of even doing a library, just creating like code snippets that you can copy and paste. I'm talking about ShadCN UI, right? Which isn't a library per se. It's just like, here's the code. You run it via CLI, but it's just like, here's your component. Take it,
Yeah.
copy, paste it, change stuff. What are some trade-offs between these approaches?
So GlueStack UI, the latest version with native Vent, it's very similar to ShadCN.
Okay.
While people say and assume that it's 100% copy paste, it is not. A major part of ShadCN, the heavy lifting is done by Radix UI, which is the component API layer and also solves the bigger problems of accessibility. We are also doing something very similar. If you look at GlueStack UI button, it's an unstyled button that gives you an API, and then on top of that we have styling that gets copied to your project. So you still do install the core API and accessibility layer from a library in both the approaches, what we are doing with GlueStack UI and what ShadCN does. But you get a lot of flexibility when it comes to the design system part of it, like say the number of variants that you want to have, or maybe if you want to modify the props, that okay, I want to restrict it to just these variants and these props, just do the layouting stuff a bit and then change the colors, maybe something like that. So you have full control over the design system part of it, while the low level problems that web always had before Radix UI, uh, and with GlueStack, even the mobile accessibility and all those things, right from screen readers to keyboard interaction to focus ring, mouse trap, and a bunch of really low level things that you shouldn't really uh, think about while building performant and quality apps are taken care of, and that's inside a library. Yeah.
This is so great. This is the answer to. I was going to ask you, like, what are some accessibility like tips and tricks for developers listening, but the answer is obvious, right? It's just use GlueStack UI, and all of the problems go away, because that's the whole point. You handle, as you mentioned, mouse traps, focus in, focus out style events.
Yeah.
In the European Union where I live,
Mhm.
accessibility is it's legally mandated. Meaning, if I think, yeah, by 2025, if your website is not, I believe it's AA accessible, you get huge fines. And it's good. I'm here for it, because if the web isn't accessible, then it's going to lead to all kinds of inequalities, as it already has.
Right.
I'm not sure that this is the case in India. Yet you're creating these highly accessible things. Is that because I have to assume you want your business to cater to a broader market, right?
Mhm.
Is there more to it? Is it just a question of being inclusive and a good citizen?
It's more of the second part, but at the same time, it's also looking forward to what a good library should be and should have, right? I mean,
Yeah.
why to not do it? There are libraries that does not do it, and we don't want to leave any boxes unchecked. We want to make sure that right from like everything like we have burnt our fingers, to be honest. Like if you look at NativeBase v3, there's still an issue open around performance, and that has caused a lot of harm and that has impacted in a negative way. We have learned from it and we own it, like okay, this is something that we didn't do it early on, but now we don't want to get into anything of that sort that makes it not performant or not accessible. And accessibility has both the parts. It's not just the number of non-visual things. It's also visual. The default design that we have with GlueStack UI, it so the new type of accessibility, I think it's called CGAC or something like that, which is
WCAG.
WCAGS. Yeah, that's the next version of having single A, double A, and triple A standards,
Yeah.
which also talks beyond, say, contrast ratio, because contrast ratio uh, was not the correct way of looking at visual accessibility. Now they have a better way of computing these things, and we are totally like green on those lines as well. So we have like visual cues that people should also do. While those things get into your project, you should modify it, but it's high contrast and it's all accessible. So yeah, trying to
That's
make sure
incredible.
that this does not make your project fail, because it's such a foundational thing for
Yeah.
anyone's project, right? It should. So, and we have such a huge responsibility. Like if you look at
Yeah.
NativeBase today, it has like more than 75,000 dependent projects,
Wow.
75,000 dependent projects, open source projects, and that's a huge responsibility for you to take on, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
The WCAG you mentioned, just for the listeners, is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, as some people call it. Um, I love that you mentioned how important it is because it's such a foundational piece of anyone's stack.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the future. Let's cast some vision here. Because I went on geekyants.com before this episode
Mhm.
and I saw something, I think it's new. And I want you to tell me. I saw the subtitle. It says Design and Engineering Studio with a User First and AI Approach. Did you add this AI thing because of the AI hype? If yes, that's totally acceptable. Everyone's doing it. But what does that mean? Like, how are you all using AI at Geeky Ants?
If you talk about hype, we should have had Web3 as well at some point, but we never had it. We never had it. So definitely we are not hype driven. We are value driven for sure. If we see a value in something, and then we go ahead and add it and
You
update.
didn't see
Yeah.
you didn't see a value in making your like Geeky Ant logo an NFT and then selling it for like 1 million?
We didn't see a direct value. There is a definitely large portion of the internet that see a value in it, but for me personally, I have not directly. It's even hard for me to comment on it, one, because I have very surface level knowledge on that.
Same.
So
I
one.
echo what you said from my
Yeah.
side 100%. I have exactly your same view on this. Anyway, please
Yeah,
continue.
yeah. So let's not talk about that, about the Web3 and NFT part. But yeah, AI, I think it's now. So I was at a panel just last week at a conference here in Bangalore. It was by companies like Ola, and they are building their own AI models. They call it Kritim, and the whole agenda of the panel was to how do you go from 1 to 100 when it comes to Gen AI. And hearing from the panelists and the audience and the whole number of people there, it's impacting like at every level, right from the first lead that we get, and if we brainstorm on the idea of the lead of the clients, uh, all the way to planning the project using the tech stack, and using AI as your peer when you are pair programming with GitHub Copilot or ChatGPT. Today, I quote what I said earlier in the panel. Like on my personal projects, more than 50% of my code is written by AI, which is huge. Like 50% of my code is now, you can assume that it's written in English by me, right? Because that's the language that I'm using to talk to AI, and then it's generating the code, which is which has a high impact. And it's evolving in the right direction. If you look at GitHub Copilot Workspaces, which was announced just I think 3 days back, the whole industry is moving towards that, and we are using it in our day-to-day operations. So that's
Yeah.
why we changed it. Yeah.
That's so cool. I love that. To quote the great Jensen Huang from NVIDIA, the co-founder CEO, he mentioned, right, like the future programming language is going to be English. And I think by future, he maybe meant tomorrow, because I agree with you. I
Yeah.
also, most of the things are fun. This is a little known fact. My entire podcast is actually run, except this portion here, except the recording, is run by a team of AI agents. From transcription to thumbnails, all of it like is fully automatic, which is why I can move so. We actually moved to twice weekly, as opposed to once weekly because of this. Like it's just fully.
That's so good.
And I think this is also the future. I think we can talk more about the secret sauce of AI there, but I think really it is agentic workflows. That's the real game changer. Like having a team. This sounds maybe a little bit inhuman, but in a previous life, I would have had a team of people. Unfortunately, or fortunately to do it, to run the podcast. But now this team of agents is so good. And sometimes mistakes happen. Like I send not me, but some agent will send like an outline to someone too late. But in any like it's not. And I think this is the cool part, because it's this inflection point where it's not perfect, but it's almost, and we get to drive it. I'm just scared for the day where 10% of my code is written by me and not 50%. but I think we'll, like you said, it's going in the right direction. How is AI,
Mhm.
besides Copilot writing your code, how is it like impacting the front end development, but also the work you're doing besides just like writing the code for you? How is it impacting the work you're doing at GlueStack? What I mean by that is, have you all noticed the ability to move faster with client work? And you mentioned you build by value and IP, not by time. But that in theory means you can take on more work, right? If you have the right AI driven workflows. I guess more directly, how's it impacting business, and is it positive?
Hmm. Uh, it's positive. Definitely, it's positive. When it comes to the number of problems that AI can solve, definitely we can take in more work with the same number of people. That
Yeah.
means a net positive, I would say. But that's a very micro view looking at just geeky ends. If you look at the macro view, like the whole global economics, how does that change? Uh, we can only like have opinions at this point. It's very hard
Yes.
to say where it's going to be, but in my opinion, it's more like the whole industry will have more problems to solve. I mean, the way we are moving towards using these AI technology and tools for solving different kinds of problems, it unlocks a different set of problems to be solved altogether, which is amazing. So we'll have more people coming in to solve more problems, and that will eventually bring in more work overall to the consulting industry or to the product companies altogether. So I see more or less on a positive side as of now, and it's so uh, unpredictable. It's not just AI that is impacting the whole industry. There has been shift with the COVID, and we are still going through that phase of like cutting costs and whatnot
Yeah.
across the industry. What used to be like very bloated in terms of the number of perks that we used to get or the flexibility that we used to have, it's very reduced uh,
Yeah.
today across the
Yeah.
industry, and that is largely not because of AI.
Yeah.
So
Of
there are
course.
so many different variables, I would say. It's hard to
Yeah.
comment. Yeah.
There's also two wars at this time concurrently happening
Yes.
that's affecting the global economy. There's
Totally.
also I do believe the web engineering industry is a bubble, and this bubble is slowly deflating. Um, Rightfully so. I think,
Yeah.
however, I think the next bubble is probably AI, and you can already see this with Nvidia stock, for example. But you know, after being alive as long as I have, I sort of recognize everything's a big circle, and things get inflated and things get deflated, and that's just life. And I think for any listeners, this doesn't need to be negative, because you could just um, sort of find peace in the fact that if you're not in something that's inflating right now,
Mhm.
you'll have your day. In any case, okay, about AI, can I have to assume that at GeekyAnts, you've got people, as you mentioned, if there's people on the bench, you devote those time units to R&D and innovation. Do you have people looking into some type of like crystal ball? And I don't mean this literally, of course, but looking into some type of crystal ball and looking at AI, other emerging technologies, and GlueStack UI, and what can we draw lines, but can we connect them? Can we add maybe like UI features to GlueStack UI? Can we add generated style names and components? Like, is that research being done, and what does it look like at
Yes.
GeekyAnts?
Totally. So we are constantly looking at what the folks on the web front are doing, and definitely there are very fewer companies working in the overlap of universal apps. So if you look at V0 by Vercel,
Yeah.
that's an interesting project, but it generates ShadCN, Tailwind CSS. Uh, can we build something like that for GlueStack UI? In fact, we have built a draft version of it already. Uh, and yeah, that's just one way of looking at things. I mean, we have like crossover from the whole like UI generation that happens on the code. Can we take that to Figma somehow? So we have built a tool that generates these in a very V0 style sort of thing, and then you can copy that to Figma with some HTML to Figma, while it also maintains the design system of the project that you're working on. So different stages we are solving the problems using AI, and yeah, like it can be with UI, with design systems altogether, or anything in between.
This is so cool. There's this great project I'm reminded of by TL Draw called Make It
Yeah.
Real. Have you seen this?
Yes.
Where
Yeah.
where you draw on a whiteboard just some like sketch, some
Yeah.
prototype. You select it, you click Make Real, and then it will make
Yeah.
it a real functioning web page.
Yes.
Since TL Draw is open source, I'm
Mhm.
wondering if GeekyAnts can play in that field and instead of just make it real, add a make it native button. Oh, that would be cool, wouldn't it? And then you just get an APK. You're like, here's your Android binary.
That's a brilliant idea.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love this is where I spend most of my time. As I mentioned, with the Gen AI agents and so on. I think this is the space to play in. And for
Yeah.
those listening, no matter what background you have, I think it's cool. You have a seat at the table. I think a big misconception, by the way, about this is a lot of people think, oh, I'm not an AI engineer. I can't because I don't know lambda calculus. But the thing is, they're very different. AI
Yeah.
engineering has nothing to do with machine learning. Oh well, maybe not, but it if you want to work in the space, you just have to know JavaScript, man. I think that's something that a lot of people maybe. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with that because when it comes to, I think Gen AI, you can use it as a tool rather
Yeah,
getting into the details or the science behind machine learning and all the things that these ML and AI engineers do. I think using Gen AI. So there was this discussion at the panel as well, like prompt engineering, and the question was, do you see prompt engineers as a designation? And people had different views, different opinions on it. I mean, the whole point of like having this discussion is that prompt engineering is a whole different thing, and it's less related to the low level underlying technology, and you can actually use it for your advantage to solve problems.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, very very well said.
Mhm.
Okay, so what I've been doing with a lot of the founders and CEOs that came on this show this season. And this is everybody. This is like Glauber Costa from Terzo. Recently, this was JV from SST. Everybody, basically. I've been asking this one question, and I want to share with you the motivation behind this question,
Mhm.
and really use that time that I'm speaking to give you time to think about an answer,
Sure.
which is so like we know about HTML, CSS, JavaScript. These are language specifications fundamentally, right? And the language specifications are typically treated as a living standard. So the HTML document is a living standard. It's like it's got headings, and it's like when you see a div, this is the attributes for it, and so on and so forth. There isn't such a document for founders and CEOs, and it's wild because everyone I talk to, their experience is super different. However, I've been around long enough to know that things aren't really that different. Like everybody likes to think they're a snowflake, but if you look at a big snowscape scene, they all kind of look the same. And I think part of being a founder CEO, and I'm not one, so maybe I'm wrong, is that there are some like common tenets, common features that you could comfortably sort of pull out from the broad definition and go like, yeah, I would totally put that in a living standard document because me, my peers, I've heard it from other people. This seems to ring true. Um, so the question: if there was such a document, what would, from your experience, you put in there? And maybe to help you think a bit more, I can share what other people have said. So, for example, Bielman from Netlify recently said, I would everything's so volatile, as I said, right? He's like you have to be able to adapt to change rapidly, because you never know, and maybe the economy goes bad, and you need to pivot to fundraising, or you need to do layoffs. Like it's complicated. So that's what Bielman said. David Khurshid from Stately, said exactly the same thing. Jay from SST, and these are the ones that come to mind. Jay from SST said he spends over 80% of his brain capacity or time thinking about what is the best like foundation for someone, base case, for them to feel like productive, for them to feel motivated to bring themselves to work. How do I best, as you mentioned, empower people? So that for him is tenet, like thinking about that. And then finally, Guillermo Rausch from Vercel said being able to use your product daily and using your product daily. So kind of like you're rebuilding geekyants.com with GlueStack. He said that is something every founder CEO should maybe think of doing or be in that direction, because when you eat your own dog food, you can really feel the pain and also the joy that your users are feeling and develop more empathy and create better products for them. Okay, so those were 4 examples.
Yeah.
in this document that hypothetically is just it's like a Turing machine. It doesn't exist. It's a theoretical document. What would your contribution be?
I can walk you through my thought process because I don't have the answer right away.
Sure.
But I totally relate to all the 4 examples that you just mentioned. I was going to say more on the first couple mentions, like evolve and rebuild. I think that has been at the very core of GeekyAnts, that you never stop building, and you have to rebuild the whole company every 6 months. That's the whole idea,
Wow.
and we stopped doing that for a while, and we saw that how it impacted the overall culture and the growth of GeekyAnts. We stopped rebuild. We thought, okay, this is stable. Let's just work on some R&D, and this will grow all by itself. But it does not happen. Even the big companies out there, uh, you have great examples, right? Like the big ones out there that stopped evolving, that stopped rebuilding themselves every 6 months or 12 months. Uh, Again, not a very good example, but still, Nokia, for example, the Symbian OS, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they got killed because they didn't move fast and evolve with the evolving tech trends. Uh, so that's very, very important according to me. Evolve and rebuild company every 6 months. Don't have like 2 year, 3 year roadmap. That's so bad. I mean, that almost. I mean, it gets on my nerves when people say, "Okay, this is the 5 year plan." That's what I'm thinking. Come on, like will it even be there, the problem that you're trying to solve and the mission that
Yeah.
you're after? I mean, it's so vague. I mean, 5 year, you can have a very, very zoomed out vague idea of what you want to do, but I
Yeah.
mean, that's not, you can't like put the pen to paper on this particular thing. And I also like what you just said about using your own product. I put it
Yeah. Guillermo. Yeah.
Guillermo said that. I put it more in terms of like, be the first customer of your own,
Nice.
or maybe solve problems for yourself. Don't solve it for others. Be selfish there. And if you solve problems for yourself, I think you ultimately solve problems for others as well. So I put it that way. This also, I mean, Kidze keeps talking about the same thing, like solve your own problems,
Yeah.
and you'll ultimately build something that works for others as well. Uh, there are things beyond it as well. I think I'm driven by the leadership principles kind of at Amazon as well. Few of them like really ring a bell when it comes to bias for action or maybe customer obsession. These sort of things also, I think, should go in that probably living document for the entrepreneurs or founders. Yeah.
Fantastic. When
Yeah.
you talk about evolve and rebuild,
Mhm.
and great example by the way with Nokia. I think I struggle with thinking about Apple this way. Like, okay, Microsoft, world's most valuable tech company. If they're not already displaced by Nvidia, Nvidia, by the way, great example of evolving and rebuilding, right? Because you go from game GPUs to AI GPUs.
Yeah.
But Apple, I don't see them like every year. It's the same iPhone with incremental updates, right? So surely they're doing something right.
Yeah.
Do you how do you see this through your lens of evolve and rebuild? And of course I'm not I don't mean to put too much weight on your shoulders here. You're a developer like me. You're not some industry analyst, so this
Yeah.
is not some big thing. But can we see aspects of evolve and rebuild at in the way Apple runs, or am I missing something?
No, you're right, and we had this discussion internally as well. Very similar discussion on like when you should care about the user interface, for example, or the experience altogether, versus when you should not. Look at say Hacker News, for example. Uh,
Yeah,
yes, yeah, they are known for their, I mean, whole startup ecosystem, and whatever new comes in, it's there. They don't
yeah,
care about the interface a lot. So while on the other side, Apple is driven by the experience, and they have to be like very high. They have very high expectations from the consumers, and they have to be consistent on that front. Although Apple also has a lot of different variables to play here, like maybe the status game or being in its own league sort of thing. But when you care about user interface a lot versus when you should not and care about the core problem solving, I think that's subjective to what you're building, what you're targeting. And yeah, also going back to like when you should evolve and rebuild, I think Apple has been evolving and they have also been rebuilding. If you uh, talk about removing, say, USB ports from MacBooks or the CD and DVD, for example. So they are the industry leaders in that sense that okay, they have the guts of okay saying we won't do it because we want to look forward. They also evolved and rebuilt as well with a very quality first and well proven technologies that other companies have already used it. But taking that call, having that guts to decide and then stop altogether, that's I think also a part of being rebuilding or evolving over time.
Excellent. That's so well put. And indeed, that did highlight something I wasn't seeing with the way Apple was doing that. Great. I'm also moved by the fact that you mentioned you tried to sort of treat GeekyAnts at some point as cool. It's stable. We're good. Did I understand correctly? You said productivity went down. People just didn't care much about shipping, or was it more that the leadership didn't care much, or was it both?
Both. So that's when we like recently we have started working a lot on leadership principles and the sessions that we want to do. And
you've reached that size.
Yeah. Do we have it written everywhere in the like on different floors, like move fast and break things as an example, although we don't have
Right.
it, but yeah, some of those quotes which reflect what we are. So again, goes back to stories, and we are doing that right now. We miss doing that, so that the culture like evolves all by itself. Even we don't have Steve Jobs today, Apple still remains to be the industry leaders, right? So, and that happens only by when you build, when you have a combination of growing culture by certain processes. I think that's what we need right now.
And a vision, a big broad vision. You mentioned this 5-year plan triggers you because no human has a perfect crystal ball. How are you all doing that at GeekyAnts? What's the limit of looking forward? It's definitely not an order of years, I don't think. Is it quarters? And maybe if we can get a little bit more concrete. And what I'm trying to do is, again, isolate principles for others running businesses to help them be successful who are listening. What about quarterly OKRs, for example? We can surely look forward a quarter. Do y'all do that? Do you have objectives and key results that you want to accomplish in a quarter? So yeah, maybe we can speak to like planning in general in that lens.
So macro planning of like what we are looking at for the next 1 year is definitely important. Not like planning to the last detail. The last detail planning happens definitely in the form of OKRs, and that's quarterly. And this practice has been working really well, because when you have to look at the growth, you have to go year on year. You can see that, okay, we have been growing at say 20% organically in terms of the finance or the turnover or the head counts. While when it comes to, okay, are we doing the right content? Are we doing the right open source projects? That is planned every quarterly. So it's a combination of both vague idea for the year, for the next 1 year, and having somewhat a key result check-in sort of thing with OKR framework quarterly.
Yeah. Fantastic. I wish more companies would open source some of that historical data. Like, of course, you don't want to leak competitive advantages, and you want to have some information asymmetry for the current stage. But like, I would love to, for example, Google has been around for 20 plus years. I would love to look at their vague direction, and not to say they did it the way GeekyAnts is doing it, but I would enjoy looking at, okay, for the year 2001, this was their vague direction, and these were their 4 quarterly OKRs. How did it work? And, we're like 23 years forward from there, so it shouldn't really matter. But I think you could get a lot of information there. Anyway, just my very small suggestion to, at some point, open source that for GeekyAnts. I would love to read that.
Maybe. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Well, listen, it takes a lot of time and effort to come on here, so I won't take any more of your time, Sanket. I do want to wrap up with one final question, which is, what is next for GeekyAnts? We already mentioned the conference. I think this is really exciting, and as mentioned, we will do a giveaway of a ticket. And this ticket will be a VVIP ticket because we'll also include like a guided tour of Berlin with me and some friends. But in any case, what's next for GeekyAnts? Where can people find the latest? And then we'll let you go.
Yeah. First of all, I think there are so many things, but definitely moving more towards productized services is what is on the cards for us, because we want to like have more internal products that we can reuse across our clients, and not across our clients, but also build more businesses in terms of like dev tools, or maybe having a tool that helps you with design systems, universal approaches, and a lot of those things. So consulting is definitely going to be a major chunk, while we also work on dev tools and more of products on the same lines that solves the bigger problem of consulting and products both. So yeah.
Excellent. And people can find those on geekyants.com. Anything else you wanna mention? Maybe X or LinkedIn or
Yeah, so I think Geeky and social handle is very active. You can do it x.com/geekyants, or follow me on x.com/Sanket Sahu. Pretty active there. DMs are open for conversation. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, Sanket, it's so good. On behalf of me, all the listeners, I want to thank you so much for coming on, for sharing. Look, the drawing the line between like growing up in a small Indian town as a child of a single parent to building this business and iterating and evolving and rebuilding along the way. You've shared so much, and then we talked about open source and React Native. I learned a ton. And I'm sure a lot of people listening also did. So once again, thank you.
Thank you so much for calling me on the show, Tejas. As I mentioned earlier on Twitter in the DM, that I feel honored to be a part of such a series and would love to do it more. I mean, I'm in Berlin. After 2 weeks, we can hang out. Thank you so
Yeah,
much for
let's
doing
do
it.
that.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thanks.
again. Thank you for joining my discussion with Sanket Sahu. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Particularly, I hope you really enjoyed the beauty of engineering across their products like GlueStack UI and previously NativeBase. I hope you enjoyed the insights of growing GeekyAnts from what it was to what it is, even a multinational consultancy and a product-based or product-led, I guess, company at this point in time. And I hope you enjoyed listening to how powerful a force it is when you share things that you create in the open source ecosystem, but also in general. Like when you have something of value, sharing that value can unlock so many doors, as we saw with Sanket. I hope those takeaways really help you in your career as you navigate the tech ecosystem. If you're learning from and or enjoying this content, then I'd invite you to leave up to a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify, and also subscribe to the podcast on those platforms if you're not already. That's just a great way to support us. If you're watching on YouTube, then if you leave a comment, like, and subscribe to the thing, this would also help the algorithms. It would help people discover the content, and most importantly, it would signal to me whether it's worth continuing or not. All of this does support the podcast quite a bit at no cost to you, as outside of maybe a few clicks. So if you're able to do that, I'd appreciate it. Also, if you think any of this is worth sharing, I would encourage you to share it on social media. Thank you again for joining me for Founder CEO series. Thank you for being a part of this podcast. And most importantly, thank you for your interest in engineering.